Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. And I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Linda Heitzman Powell.
Here.
David Stevens.
Here.
Abby Callis. I do not see her. Mark Goodman.
Here.
Matthew Golker.
And he informed me he would need to log in around 7, so he will miss the first hour of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Jessica Hamilton.
Here.
And I do note the presence of Dr. Callis. Hi, Abby.
Hi, I'm here.
Yes. Edward Hunter.
Here.
Tiffany Johnson.
Here.
Sarah Kirk.
Here.
Jay Middleton.
Here.
And Doug Wright.
And I also received a message from Doug that said he would not be able to attend the meeting today.
Thank you very much. And I note the following staff members are also present: David Fine.
Here.
And Leslie Allen.
Here.
Next, David Fine will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
Thank you, Richard. This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the Executive Director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. 2 individuals have been approved for 5 minutes of public comment time each to comment on educational requirements for licensure. Also, representatives from the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPPB, will be presenting information on the EPPP licensing examination. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of KOMA are not suspended. Therefore, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On June 28th, 2024, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of such meeting. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may contact the board office by sending an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And I did check the conference call line before we got started. There's no one currently on the line, but if I hear someone beep in, I will let you know.
Thank you, David. This meeting is now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on its agenda, and that is the agenda approval. Everyone has had a chance to look at the agenda, so do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, I approve it.
I have a move from Mark. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second it. This is Jessica.
I have a second from Jessica. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
Aye.
same sign. All right. So I'll move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is the section on public comment. And as stated before, we have 2 members from the public who would like to give public comment today. One of whom is Mariah Bruman, who would like to speak on educational requirements for licensure. And I do note the presence of Ms. Bruman. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? I hate to mispronounce names.
You're doing great.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming this evening. We welcome you to the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for allowing time for this public comment. I am very relieved to see that you're all prioritizing the much needed updates to the education requirements. And as many of you have expressed, the current regulations are a bit outdated and maybe excessive relative to other states and the national accrediting body. And I certainly don't envy the task ahead of you all with revamping these, but greatly appreciate your focus. So the good news is that while updating the regulations is going to be a complex endeavor, there are opportunities here tonight for progress without undue delay. And I hope that my comment would serve as a helpful structure for possibly navigating these changes. So I have three main points for your consideration tonight, and I want to give credit as my comments are really echoes of opinions previously expressed by members of this committee. So first, many of you have expressed support for the concept that the national accrediting body tasked with the rigorous assessment of the profession-wide competencies should be sufficient for the education requirements, like it is in many other states, including the substantially equivalent state of Missouri. And as Ms. Allen put very well, the purpose of the governing body is to set the minimum standard rather than the gold standard. So prior discussions on this topic have indicated that it seems the majority of this committee may agree that APA at least meets that minimum standard. And specifically, the current coursework model requiring certain courses in residence in addition to the APA accreditation feels excessive. It creates unnecessary inefficiencies for the board and is relatively outdated as well, since the national accrediting body has already rigorously assessed for the profession-wide competencies, which of course includes assessment skills and clinical skills. Therefore, if the board decides to continue with the coursework model, it appears this may be best reserved for non-accredited programs who again have not already been rigorously vetted for obtaining those profession-wide competencies like those with an APA accreditation have. And so as the board has discussed this matter over time, there seems to be a clear opportunity to possibly motion in favor of APA as sufficient even this evening without further delay. My second point is that once that matter has been resolved, it seems the next item that would be most efficient to focus on would be updates to the definition of in residence. And the example changes that Mr. Fye shared at the prior meeting referenced removing the need to be at the physical location of the institution and added allowing in-person or face-to-face synchronous video conferencing. And this change, if done, would promote uniformity across professions and uniformity with insurance definitions of face-to-face contact. My third point and final point is that once both APA as sufficient and changes to the definition of in residence have been motioned on, the committee would be free to focus entirely on the final and more complex area of change here, which would be regulations for non-accredited programs. And at this point, the discussion of whether to maintain a coursework model for those non-accredited programs may make sense. So to conclude, I applaud this committee's prioritization of making progress in these regulations and encourage this committee to take action without undue delay where the opportunities exist this evening, specifically areas in which the committee has already expressed majority favor, and that is the APA should be sufficient. And finally, I also applaud the committee in demonstrating the board's mission of, quote, creating fair and appropriate regulations, end quote, that set the minimum standard. This mission of fair and appropriate regulations must change with the culture in which it serves. And while the comforts of tradition are appealing, progress in the field of psychology, technology, and the post-COVID world necessitate change to serve the public interest. Thank you, and thanks for your time, and I'm happy to clarify or answer any questions if there are any, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you very much for coming in this evening and providing comment. Does anyone have any questions for our guest, Ms. Baruman. While she is here, we have a moment where we could answer one or two questions if anyone has any. Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you again very much for your presentation this evening.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. We'll now move on to our presentation from the folks from ASPPB. Seeing that we do not have our second person who wished to provide public comment. Dave, is anyone in the waiting room?
No, I'm looking at the list. I don't see Dr. Provence. I don't appear that she's in the waiting room currently.
Okay, so again, we'll move on to our presentation from Dr. Hao Song and from Dr. Marianne Bernetti Atwell. And Dave, I'll have you take over from here.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're excited to have some guests with us tonight from the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPPB. I know that some of you on the committee may not be as familiar with ASPPB, but they are an association that assists licensing boards like the BSRB, specifically for the focus of psychology. Richard and I have been able to attend some of the meetings with ASPPB and meet the representatives, especially Hal and Marianne, who are here tonight. And we have some topics that are relevant to the discussion. So we reached out to ASPPB and said, this might be helpful for the members of the advisory committee to receive some information concerning the development of the licensing test, the EPPP, as well as the EPPP2. And we have a topic on the agenda concerning a possible bylaw amendment from some representatives of Texas that's also kind of focused on the test. So we thought it might be helpful for the advisory committee to have an informed discussion about this and be able to ask some questions and learn some information. So like I said, happy to have Marianne and Hal here tonight. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to both of you. And if you have any slides you'd like to share, you are welcome to do so, or you can just share information with members of the committee.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We really appreciate this opportunity to meet with you all tonight. It's good to see a couple faces that we've seen before and new faces whom we haven't seen. So we do have a presentation that we think would be beneficial for you all. It touches on some of those high spots that are of interest, such as the history, such as the validity, such as the work that goes into the development of the exam, and really how the one is different from the two. So this is a presentation that we could try to get through it in 20 minutes. Is that too long for you all, or would that be okay? Would it be all right? Okay, great. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen. Technology is not my forte, but we will give it a try here. All right. Okay, so I think you might be able to see my screen.
We can see it.
Wonderful, thank you. So we will just go ahead and work through these slides. We will try and do them quickly to make sure that we definitely give you all time to ask any questions that you might have. And again, we thank you for this opportunity tonight. So moving along, this presentation that we have put together for you all and others is really going to touch on a bit of the history related to the need for the EPPP to transition into a competency-based assessment. We're going to discuss a little bit about the difference between the 1 and 2, speak a bit about validation and bias prevention with the exam, an overview of resources available to those who are preparing to take the 2, and some high-level performance outcomes, and then to be able to open it up to any questions that you might have. As I said, some of these slides are a little heavy, so I am more than happy to share this slide deck with you at the end of this presentation. So one, you don't have to write a lot of things down, and you'll have it as a resource for yourself also. So let's just jump right into the history about the EPPP and transitioning into a competency-based assessment. So a bit of this background really originates at the core of regulations and the licensing bodies. And as you know, the core to that is the protection of the public. And boards and colleges have been working diligently to really put that focus at the forefront. The EPPP was created in '65 and was a knowledge-based exam in its birth. And over the years, it has become a tool used by jurisdictions throughout North America. In addition, many boards and colleges also have incorporated an element to assess skills. And this has happened in a variety of manners, whether it be supervisor ratings, hour requirements, oral exams. All of these have a bit of variation to them, and even some jurisdictions have changed their approach on how they're using them or if they're using them. So with the EPPP1 being knowledge-based and it's lacking the element of skills, there was significant movement really starting in the early 2000s looking at a competency-based assessment instead of just knowledge. Also taking into consideration that many professional healthcare regulating boards had moved towards a competency-based assessment themselves. And also taking into consideration a way to be able to better assess in a standardized way skills. As I mentioned, I mentioned 2000, but in theory, it really started way before then. And it wasn't just ASPPB. Actually, there were many of others who really started this work way before the association became involved. These next couple slides, these are the heavy ones I spoke to. So I'm going to move through them just a little quick, but so you can see a bit of the history of where the competency-based conversations really started bubbling up. So we had in '86 worked through the National Council of Schools and Programs of Professional Psychology, a look at core competency model. Moved on into APA's Council of Accreditation, and looking into the guidelines and principles. And then this started broadening into including more of a focus on competency and improvements in that area, kind of a feathering out into the area of competencies with COA. Also with CCTC, the Council of Chairs and Training Councils, there was work that was going into looking at practicum competencies. And it had shifted from hours of supervision to more of a competency expectation at different stages of the training. And it was really around this time that the association and other entities within the professional arena were asked to come to the table to be in these conversations. Then on into 2002, the Association of Psychology, Postdoctoral and Internship Centers, APIC, also took some time in partnership with APA through an invitation-only activity to look at competency models across all of psychology. And then moving on, APA also had additional work in the area of the Board of Educational Affairs, again looking at competency and the assessment of. And then in Canada, we had the mutual recognition agreement that came into fruition about this time, looking at how individuals were moving throughout the provinces and looking at mobility and portability and trying to find a better way for some simulation in requirements. We also moved through in 2004, again, APA developed a task force on the assessment of competencies in professional psychology, particularly in health services psychology. It really didn't move into the general applied area, but the health services area. And then in 2006, 2008, and 2009, you can see a number of variety of different activities that also continue to evolve around competency assessment, practices analysis, and the competency assessment task force that was established by the association in 2009. It continued. 2010, we had work going on with the Board of Educational Affairs, CCTC, and the Council of Graduate Departments of Psychology. Again, ASPPB was fortunate to be in those conversations. And in 2012, we had the Competency Assessment Committee that was established within the association, and COA in 2017 revised their guidelines and standards to include an increased focus on profession-wide competencies. We also had 2007, the chair of the educational doctorate within APA. He spent some time really looking at the importance of how knowledge was being assessed as we were looking at competency in the profession, but that there was a general lack of looking at skills. So again, another area where this became another topic of conversation. So from this work, there was an effort of transitioning the EPPP, looking at more of a competency model that not only looked at the knowledge, but also incorporated the look at skills, the need to assess skills, and that combination of those two. And as I just kind of real quickly ran through some of that history, over the years, many of these conversations, much of this work was brought to the membership of ASPPB throughout its mid-year and annual meetings. And it was interesting. I just kind of took a look back to see how many times the topic of the exam and transition of it had occurred, and it's been 36 times. But I know that's a large number, but we also know that there's a lot of change in those of individuals who are sitting at our boards. I had sat on the Missouri licensing board for almost 8 years, but when I think of 36 presentations, I would never have seen all of those over the years. So I think we're always at a bit of a soft spot with how communication flows and how that kind of momentum continues to flow as people come and go, regardless of how many times the topic has been discussed. So just a bit of a snapshot. In service of assisting the jurisdictions facing concerns, we were looking at how skills were not universally assessed, the lack of standardization that was really happening across the jurisdictions. APIC has also been finding some changes since COVID in their internship years, with an increased need of competency consultation request. So that has been an interesting item to take into consideration. And also the fact that even though we are post-COVID, I don't know that we know what the impact of that has been during that time period, positive or negative. I think we are a profession that will continue to learn about that as we move into the future. In addition, some of the research has suggested that 77% of psychology students report a problem with professional competency of a peer. There was also research done by Rodolpha that training directors agree that a significant majority of candidates are not ready to practice upon receipt of the degree. And training directors believe approximately 3,400 training hours needed for licensure is important for us to keep in mind. Yet, there are some postdoc requirements that have been eliminated in several jurisdictions. At my last look, it's about 17 to 20 jurisdictions that have removed the requirement for postdoc experience. So in a conclusion on the history element, I think this gives you just a little look back into really the conversation, the work that has been going into looking at a competency-based model over the last 15 years. And also looking at revising the EPPP to really in hopes of assisting jurisdictions with a standardized, objective, and legally defendable exam. And we know that your task is very heavy. Even though complaints and disciplines may vary, we know that the charge of public safety is always at your forefront. And so again, this has really been work has been put into this area in true desire to assist. So moving on to our next topic, I want to talk a little bit about, how does the 1 and 2 differ? It's been a question that we have been asked numerous times. And so this slide will give you a breakdown of the domains for the 1 as compared to the 2. And these domains were identified over the years through a job task analysis. The last job task analysis was done in 2016. It is customary to do those in about every 7 to 10 years. Just this year, we are getting ready to start with a new job task analysis. And that job task analysis is sent out. Well, first we develop a committee that works on overseeing this process with many individuals who are subject matter experts to help establish how a job task analysis will be set up. And then from there, there is a huge push that goes out to the practicing field and the academic field, looking for input from those professionals to assist with identifying what is the baseline knowledge skill needed for somebody entering practice. So through those efforts, these are the domains that you see here before you in those 2 areas. Different. And so these next slides I'm going to show you are going to give you just an actual look at what a test item is on the 1 and how that knowledge focus differs from what I'll show you from the 2. As we know, as we've taken it, and as you have been involved in this process, the 1 is based on knowledge. And this question here is an example of Piaget's theory. It's definitely a core-based item on theory, and it is in the regular format of a multiple choice question with 4 options, with the answer being the most right. And the second one, this one also is another example. And this goes back to intelligence. And again, a knowledge-based question. The 2, however, changes a bit. The layout of the 2 is much different. As we know that the 1 is a multiple choice 4 answer opportunity, the 2 varies. With the 2, some of them are multiple choice. With 4, some of them have less than 4 answers to choose from. Some of them have choose 2 answers that might fit in the situation. This is an example of how one of the layouts look. And this situation is much more of a clinical focus, a little different from the knowledge-based questions. The second one is another example. And here, this also goes into more of an ethical situation, in a clinical situation. I'll give you a moment to look at that. Another type of question that is queued up in the part 2 are video scenarios. And these scenarios are using avatars. It's really pretty interesting to look at. And I would show you, but I never have any luck with this. So I'm going to kind of, if you'll close your eyes, and an example I can give you is a session with the psychologist and a patient. The patient is an individual who is getting ready to go off to internship and is having significant anxiety. And that patient is asking their psychologist, we have been working together very well. Our work together has provided me great support in managing through graduate school. But now that I'm going off to internship, I'm having to move away from you. Is it possible for us to continue to work together, and what would that look like? And so there's an interface. And then from that video, it moves into a set of questions. So, I don't think, could you see that? Can you hear that? Let me see, hold on 1 second. Let me go back to this. I couldn't. Okay, see, I'm gonna have to move on to the next one. I'm sorry, my video does not like me. So then you'll see in this sample, you'll see 3 tabs on the top of this item. And you'll see the section to the right, which allows for 2 answers. This is a staging of questions. So there'll be a question that relates to one element of the scenario, and then it will go on to a next piece of that will work off of the same scenario, and another question that works off the next scenario. So it progresses in that clinical picture. These are not completely related, but you'll be able to see how it toggles through. Another format that is a little different in the part 2, there will be drag and drops where you may have to do a hierarchy or flow for items based on a question. This example here deals with elements of a card which could be viewed problematic. And in here, it's important to identify the inappropriate areas or how an individual may have been trying to show themselves to the public. So again, a bit of a variation from what we are used to in the knowledge format of the exam. From here, we're going to move into validity, and I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Song.
Thank you. Yeah, we as Marianne just showed you, the questions on part 2 are quite different from part 1. And how do we establish these the validation of the exam, both parts? So she also mentioned the very important part of the job task analysis. So as you can see, the validation is mainly achieved through the content. Content follow the professional assessment standards established by APA, Educational Research Association, and also National Council on Measurement in Education. So they have educational and psychological testing standards. So a series of activities involved subject matter experts and follow these important steps, job task analysis to establish what to test and how much in each the content area, then translate them into kind of a test specification or exam blueprint, and then follow that to create the exam forms and create questions. And those questions is an iterative quality improvement process, and involved both content review and also the statistic psychometric evaluation of every item. For this high-stake examination, every questions from its initial drafting to review, revision, pre-testing to operational can easily take 2 to 3 years. And also the performance standard. So these 500 scaled score, it's established by psychologists and representative of the whole profession, and a variety of demographic cultural backgrounds, and they establish this criterion-based standard. So all these kind of it's validate the examination. Next one. So why not others? Especially people saying, "Oh, can you predict who going to be a great psychologist or end up not in any discipline actions?" That's not what professional licensure examination is evaluated, because just like the driver's license or doctor program, doctor qualified comprehensive examination, we just want to make sure you have that minimal kind of a baseline knowledge and skills or competence to enter into this profession. But it's hard to predict how great drivers you are going to be, or you will not have any car accident. That's exactly what EPPP is validated. It's mainly by the content, knowledge, skills. It's measured to make sure people enter into this profession to provide safe psychological services, but not predict how great they are going to be. Next one. So as I said, according to the joint standard, the criteria related evidence is not applicable for credentialing examinations such as EPPP. California Office of Professional Examination Services, OPIS, also conducted an independent external review of both Part 1 and 2 in 2021, and they conclude both 1 and 2 met the professional guidelines, technical standards, like I keep referring to the joint standard, and also California's business and professional codes. And both content 1 and 2 do have its kind of distinctive focus. One more focused on the general knowledge of psychological practice. And next slide, 2 is more focused on the application of knowledge, or those assessment or diagnosis treatment skills. So and also next slide, they said they do kind of value the different item types, like Marianne just showed you. They feel that's kind of reflect the clinic practice more vividly to measure those skills. So another thing you probably often heard is about EPPP is biased against some people from different background. So let's talk a little bit on that. So first thing I do want to point out is the differential performance versus bias. These are definitely 2 different things. You cannot automatically equate differential performance to bias. Bias has its specific kind of definition. They refer to kind of a construct we are measuring through the examination. Either they are not what intend to measure, or they underrepresentative represent what intend to measure. Those are the bias. But differential performance, they are very complicated. So they have many factors. They interact together. So they make cause those differential performance. We like to work with the educational program, work with different boards to understand what those things are, to try help our psychologists. But we cannot just say, kind of simplify to say we see some differences for people from different backgrounds. EPPP are biased against those group of, especially relatively lower performed groups. So we are continues working to understand, and also try to see if there's anything kind of we can help. But in terms of the as EPPP creators, we try our best to do from the test development aspects. Let's just look at it a little bit on that. Next slides. Okay, so as I said, from item development and item review, because item is the kind of a building block for the examination. So we want to kind of prevent from the very first step to for any potential differences. So we provide training to all these hundreds of volunteers. They are subject matter experts, and we also invite as many as possible from all kinds of backgrounds in different kind of professional focus areas, clinic, school, counseling, even including IO, psychology, different background, different geographic areas, different cultural and demographic background, and also provide training to before they start writing questions, and also these iterative process from item drafting, review, revision to pre-testing, statistical analysis, and then again review, revision, and as I said, easily can take 2 to 3 years before the item become part of the real exam, real score. And especially, I want to mention we have established item review committee. This is a separate committee. This committee has 10 people. They are truly experts in these working with people from different backgrounds. So they will review the questions. We have a statistical and analysis process called a differential item functioning controlled on people's overall performance. If these items showed significant differences between different backgrounds like gender or race, ethnicity background, we flagged out these questions and let this committee, item review committee, to review from the language or cultural background to see whether these items can be continued use or should retired from the item bank. So we have analyzed up to now over 2,000 items, only flagged less than 60 items, and that this item review committee to look at those items, and only 8 items were decided to retire from future use. So as you can see, less than 0.4%. So very, very limited evidence of potential buyers. And also, I want to point out, you cannot assume these items are always disadvantaged minority groups. Actually, they are even some are advantaged minorities, some are disadvantaged. So basically, the effects are washed out, and very little item. So, okay, I'll turn it to Marianne to talk about resource available for EPPP.
Thank you, Hao. One of your questions.
Marianne, before you begin, we are we're at 6:45, and I know that we have a number of agenda items that we would like to cover. Just wondering how much time, how much more you might have left, because we do want to make sure that you give a thorough presentation, and this has been great thus far. How much more might you have left?
You know, we could, since we're going to give you the slides, you're more than welcome. We only have about 7 more slides left, but I think it would probably be beneficial for you all just to get those last couple, because they talk about like some of the performance that we've seen for those jurisdictions that have been using it. And you might want to have Hao here in case you have any questions. So why don't I just jump to the last 3 slides if you would like that, Dr. Noble, or we're happy just to stop here, whatever's best for you.
How about we go to the last few slides?
Okay.
And we can go from there.
Okay. Why don't we do that? And Hao, you've got 3 slides left. So if you want to move through these kind of quick, and then if there's any follow-up questions, we definitely are here for y'all.
Great. Yeah, so these are based on these early adopter states, okay? So not big sample size to begin with, but we matched people's first attempt part one score with first attempt part two scores. As you can see, these two parts are moderately positively correlated. About 30% of part two scores can be explained by part one. So as you can see, that's the correlation coefficient line, and also these two circles showed some people who failed part one at the first attempt can pass part two, and the other showed vice versa. So you can see these two are kind of measuring two distinct constructs, but they complement each other. The other is based on this 309 takers. So the first attempt is about for the accredited program, it's about 70% passing rate. But after second, third, you can see they reached very quickly to mid 80s. So some rumors about part two has a kind of 30% passing rate. That's not true. Okay, and then these are the breakdown about those early adopter states, their passing rate. So as you can see, they are pretty comparable to part one. I will stop here.
Thank you. We apologize for being too long-winded.
Oh, no. We really appreciate the presentation, and I wanted to make sure that folks had time for questions regarding the history behind the development of the EBBB2, as well as the relationship between the one and the two, and the adoption of the two across the country, and the proposal that Texas is putting up at the ASPPB annual meeting upcoming in October. So I want to turn it over to our group. Does anyone have any question or questions for Doctors Song or Bernetti Atwell?
Yes, I'm Mark Goodman. I'm wondering what the pass rate is for the tests for EPP 1 and 2. For example, is it 70% the pass rate, 75%, 80%?
So for part one, for accredited program graduates, the average all 66 jurisdiction is close to 80.
Okay, 80% would be the pass rate. Okay.
Yeah. It's lower during the pandemic years, but over time, relatively consistent at 80.
Thank you. I was
Sure.
curious as to that. Yes.
Any other questions?
So the matter that's going to be before ASPPB in a few months, the Texas resolution has to do with, and please correct me in terms of how I'm framing it for the group and for those who might be watching online. Texas has raised a concern about the mandating of the EBBB2. So for those who are not aware, all jurisdictions will have to adopt the EBBB2 if they plan on continuing with utilizing the EBBB1 by January 1, 2026. But the resolution from Texas proposes a modification to that. Can either of you speak to the resolution and how that piece has come about? Like what has been the rationale, or what has been some of the reasonings behind, or yes, I'll frame it that way, the reasonings behind such a proposal has taken place to be put in front of the different boards at ASPPB this fall?
Mhm. Well, first, I would hate to speak on behalf of Texas. However, on behalf of ASPPB, I believe that this is coming forth due to the fact of the EPPP moving into a competency-based assessment coming January of 2026, meaning a test that includes knowledge and skills. And so I think that is the focus. The fact that it is not going to still be able to have that there'll be access to one part without the other part.
Mhm.
And I think the language within the amendment is addressing a number of things, from just the approach of the association, its approach with the exam, and the utilization of the exam by jurisdictions.
Mhm.
So I think there's two parts to that amendment, and I believe you all are going to be looking at that this evening. I believe that's my understanding. I think your jurisdiction, along with most jurisdictions, because I believe this is a really important topic. I'm hoping as many jurisdictions as possible will come to that annual meeting, because I think it's important for people to talk. I think it's important for people to learn. And I think it's important to not only take into consideration the moment, but the impact to organized psychology decades from now. I think we're at a real important time in the regulatory arena for our field, and for our field overall.
And you and I had a conversation about just that. I remember a conversation between the two of us last year about deregulation and imposed deregulation. And I concur with you 1,000% that we are at an inflection point when it comes to the regulation of psychology across the country. And I think it's absolutely an important conversation to be having with all of our boards. Like, how do we want to handle regulation matters, beginning with the assessment of competency with our licensees. That's very important.
Agree. And we're in such a difficult time in the world right now, because as the stigma for mental health has gone down, and the blooming that has really occurred with those openly pursuing mental health care, mental health treatment, and the fact that, schools are only graduating 10 to 12 students every year that come down our field. So, the exam is such an important piece in this journey, but it's not the only important piece. It's a very complicated issue that we're all faced with right now. So I'm just so fortunate that so many of you will be bringing your thoughts, will be bringing your voice. And frankly, we need everybody's voice. There shouldn't just be one voice, ever. So I hope that you all will have representation at that annual meeting. We would look and just appreciate the opportunity to have your voice and your presence there.
Well, I am venturing to come. There are some things that are kind of going on in that time frame, but I have already told David that I really would like to go this year. And hopefully there will be others who will go along with me. Anyone else have any questions? We have to. I'll take time for one more from anyone. Seeing none, thank you both so much, Dr. Song, Dr. Bernetti Atwell for.
Marianne, just call me Marianne. It's much
I-
easier that way.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you
Yeah.
both for coming this evening. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you both in a couple of months.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take
And
care.
thank you for what you
Thank
all
you.
do.
No,
Thank you.
Thank
you all
you.
take care.
Bye.
So I'll move us right along to our next agenda item. And I believe that it's the executive director's report. I need to pull the agenda.
Actually, Richard, there's one small step, and that is review and approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Oh, yeah, you have to approve minutes, otherwise they don't go into the public record. You've all had a chance to to review the minutes from the prior meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
David moves. Do I have a second?
Yes, Mark, good.
I'll take that from Mark. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. All right, the minutes have been approved, and I'll now move, and my computer is loading things slowly. I think it is time for the executive director's report. And I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Richard. And I know we have a number of items still on the agenda for this meeting, so I will aspire to keep this concise, but also helpful for you all. In terms of updates for you, I just want to let you know, we've talked about CE Broker in the past. That is a company the board is going to be partnering with in terms of providing an opportunity for licensees to upload documentation that you've completed your CE hours. And that will help us during the auditing process. We audit 10% of all applicants when they renew their licenses. So in the next month, probably you will start to see messages from the BSRB that we are going to be beginning partnering with the e-broker. We're going to be rolling out the profession of professional counseling first, and then social work, and then the others as we follow. But we've had a number of meetings behind the scenes. Again, this partnership with CE Broker is a free agreement with the licensing board. You will all have access to free accounts with CE Broker. If you choose to do a paid account, that is something optional. But this is a nice resource for everyone that should be free. We would encourage you to take advantage of it because we think it'll be helpful. You won't have to hold on to your records. You can just upload them into the portal, assign them into certain categories like ethics hours or diagnosis and treatment hours. And then if someone is audited, we can check that. So we'll have more information for you, but we're very close to launching that. In terms of items from the most recent board meetings, the board last met on July 8th, and happy to announce at the July board meeting every year, the board elects a new chair and vice chair. This year, the board has elected David Anderson to serve as the new chair for the board, and Laura Shaughnessy will be the new vice chair for the board. So really happy to be working with David Anderson and Laura Shaughnessy in their new role. Additionally, we have a new public member on the board. Jacqueline Lightcap has she did not seek reappointment to the board. She was a public member, and so she has stepped off the board, and Denise Sisman is the new public member on the board. Concerning some other updates, we have recently passed a bill in Kansas to add Kansas to a social work licensing compact. As part of that process, since this compact is very, very new and is not active yet, Kansas was the 7th state, and the model language said as long as 7 states pass that language, the Rules Committee can start meeting. So since that point, a number of other states have joined, and this fall, that Rules Committee will begin to meet. At the board meeting, the board selected me to be the commissioner for the Social Work Compact, and so I will be transitioning into that new role, and I'll be also transitioning out of the role of commissioner for the SIPAC Compact. I've been serving in that capacity for the last couple of years, but we're going to be transitioning another individual into that role. So looking forward to helping out the Social Work Compact get up and running, but want to make you aware of that. And then just an update on the jurisprudence topic that we had talked about at the last couple of meetings. We are still planning to launch that alternative to jurisprudence as a 1-hour webinar interactive learning opportunity for you. We'll have more information as it's available, but the board is officially given the go-ahead for that. So it will be free for any licensees. We're also going to open that up to students if they want to log on for those sessions as well. And we will have one for each of the 7 professions. And then wanted to let you know about a couple of unusual items concerning upcoming board meetings. The board meets every other month for a regular 3-hour meeting the second Monday of the month. So the next full board meeting would have been the second Monday in September. However, once a year, the board likes to have an all-day planning meeting to discuss items that require additional conversation and also plan items for the legislative agenda. The board has selected to have that meeting at the end of September on Monday, September 30th, and that will be off-site. That will be in Lawrence, Kansas. And instead of having 2 board meetings that month, the board has elected to have the regular business portion of the board meeting the evening before on Sunday evening, September 29th. So we will have that part Sunday, September 20th. And the following morning, the board will have their all-day planning meeting. Both will be in person in Lawrence. Information on the address is posted on the BSRB website. It is a public meeting, so any individuals from the public are welcome to attend. But due to the logistics of having an off-site meeting, we're not going to be able to broadcast that one. Also for November, like I said, we would normally have the second Monday of the month for that meeting. It's going to fall on Veterans Day, so allow people the opportunity to attend ceremonies that day, or because some individuals work in facilities that would be closed that day, we are going to have a different date for that meeting. That will be the November meeting will be on the first Monday of the month, which will be November 4th. And then one last announcement I want to make. Last year, we launched a couple of new opportunities for engagements with different groups that we wanted to have some additional conversations with, share some information with, and build some new relationships with these groups. So last year, we in the past, we'd had roundtables with educators, and we really opened that up last year, and we put together an informational meeting for educators for a lot of the institutions around the state that have programs for the professions regulated by the BSRB. We did that over Zoom, put on by the BSRB staff, and we had a really positive outcome from that. We had about 40 individuals attend that presentation, and then we opened it up for Q&A, and we were able to collect feedback from individuals from the different schools, and then provide that to the board for opportunities for potential changes to law or changes to regulation. This year, we are going to be repeating that. The date for that presentation will be on Thursday, September 19th at 1 p.m. And we'll be putting out more information about that. But I just want to let you know that informational presentation will take place again. We'll cover some different material. We'll probably focus on regulation and recent changes to regulation, but then we'll also open up for public comment time. So I'll be reaching out to educators, but that meeting will be on Thursday, September 9th or September 19th at 1 p.m. And then the following day, last year, we did something brand new, and that was we did an informational presentation for employers of mental health facilities and other employers of mental health providers. And so very similar presentation, but for a different group of contacts. And that was also well received. We had about 40 people attend that presentation last year over Zoom. So this year we're going to do the same thing, and that will be on Friday, September 20th at 1 p.m. So like I said, we'll put out more information about both of those opportunities, but based on the comments we received last year, they were very positive. So we'll collect any feedback we get from those opportunities and then deliver it to the board so the board can have some additional discussion on those items at the meeting on September 30th. So with that, I will end my report and see if there's any questions.
Any questions for Dave regarding his report?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank him for his service with being on the SIPACT committee and helping with that organization over the last few years as he's transitioning off.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Seeing no other.
Am I seriously getting pulled over?
I'm going to go ahead and mute you.
Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll ask Dave to move on to an update on SIPAC.
Okay, great. And in your packet of material, I did include one of the most recent newsletters from the SIPAC Commission. It does have some updates in terms of number of individuals per state that are practicing under SIPAC authority. So we did get that information. Also, SIPAC has made some additional information available, and I'm still analyzing some of these numbers. But basically, when SIPAC started, we had concerns that we have a number of out-of-state licensees that are licensed in Kansas. And some of the concern was that individuals who are licensed in other states practicing in Kansas may decide to drop their license with the BSRB and instead practice under SIPAC authority. And it's kind of difficult to track that information. We're still working through that information. But what SIPAC has done is when individuals renewed their authorization to practice, they had a mandatory question on the survey that asked essentially what states are you providing services into. So the hope was, in order to meet the demand of services, we would at least have good data that would show, our number of licensees has gone down. However, we know that this many people are providing services into Kansas through SIPAC authority, which is helping the citizens of Kansas receive the services they need. So I did get a report on the fourth quarter, and it basically showed that there's about 51 people who reported providing telehealth services into Kansas. I was able to go ahead and use the SIPAC website to find the home state for those individuals in terms of their home state license. And I found it interesting. There's a number of individuals who, there's only maybe 2 per state, but 5 were from Arizona, 7 were from Colorado, 4 were from Nebraska, 3 Washington, 3 Georgia, and 3 Illinois. And then in the first quarter of 2024, I ran the numbers similarly for people who renewed in the first quarter. Found that there were about 5 from Colorado, 4 from Georgia, 3 from Minnesota, 7 from Missouri, 3 from Pennsylvania, but similarly about maybe 40 people providing services into the state. So still waiting to get the numbers back for the second quarter. And then when the third quarter comes in, that will be helpful as well. But these should not be duplicative. So one quarter, you're going to have a separate group of names, but that is positive information. It does kind of show that even if we have lost some licensees, there's basically 40 new people in each quarter that are providing telehealth services into Kansas through SIPAC authority. And it is interesting to me to see what states those individuals are licensed in concerning being able to provide services into Kansas. So I'll continue to track that data. One last note I thought I would make you all aware of. So when SIPAC was passed in Kansas, there was also information that said the SIPAC Commission will charge the state of Kansas, and specifically the BSRB, a fee of $10 every year per person who's licensed in Kansas with a home state license, and they receive authority to practice under the SIPAC Commission. So essentially, for everyone who's practicing under SIPAC authority who lists Kansas as their home state license, at the end of the calendar year, SIPAC looks back and says, if there were 80 people practicing in Kansas under SIPAC, we are going to charge the Kansas BSRB $800. If there's 100 people practicing under SIPAC authority who have listed Kansas as their home state, we will charge the BSRB $1,000. So losing the revenue from the out-of-state licensees, plus absorbing that fee, or the assessment, it's what they refer to it as, is going to have an impact on BSRB revenue. So when the proponents of the bill were in committee, what they did is they offered an amendment to add to BSRB the ability to charge a fee upon initial licensure or upon renewal for licensed psychologists who were practicing under SIPAC authority. And it would be something the BSRB could charge those individuals up to $25 if they were practicing under SIPAC authority. So the board had a discussion about that, decided not to do it upon initial licensure, but to do it upon renewal. If someone was practicing under SIPAC authority, when they renewed their license in Kansas, we would look at those numbers, determine those individuals, and then send them information about that fee. So if you are authorized by SIPAC and you got an email from me explaining the details, then that was what that was related to. So this is our first time charging that fee. It is just $25 per psychologist, but that's the reason that those went out. I've answered a few questions from individuals, but overall, people have appreciated the explanation, and we've not really received a lot of resistance, or that they kind of understand why that fee was charged. But it does help us mitigate the cost of being part of this compact. So wanted to clarify that in case you had received any questions, or if you have any additional questions about that. But with that, I'll end the report on SIPAC.
Anyone have any questions regarding David's report on SIPAC? I just want to say thank you for going through the process of cleaning the data and getting the information that you got for us this evening. I know David and I had a previous conversation about the data that he had received, and it wasn't in clean shape. And it took a little bit of time and back and forth between his data source so that he could get the data. So I appreciate your efforts in presenting the data this evening. And I think it is interesting information for us to have as we continue to be a part of SIPAC, and as we, especially when it comes to our neighboring states like Colorado and Nebraska, how many practitioners from sort of nearby might be engaging in practice here in Kansas. So any other comment or questions for David regarding SIPAC? Seeing none, I'll move us along to items under old business. We have two items. The first that is listed is a continued discussion on possible changes to educational requirements. As you remember, we had public comment on this earlier, and I would like to turn it back over to Dave so that he can give an introduction to where we have left off and where we might begin.
Okay, thank you. And Leslie Allen, the Assistant Director and Licensing Manager for the BSRB. Please feel free to jump in too if you have some additional comments. I'm going to try to frame some of the discussion, but I thought the presenter did a nice job of touching on some of the points the advisory committee has recently discussed. The language in that regulation details some of the requirements for licensure. One of the points that was discussed by the individual who provided public comment noted that currently that regulation states that even individuals who receive their education from APA accredited schools still have to meet the specific coursework that's identified in the regulation. And so I think that is one of the items for the advisory committee to potentially weigh in on. Some of the other professions, their regulations state that if an individual received their education from a program that's accredited by the National Accrediting Body, we can move them forward, but the specific program level requirements and coursework level requirements are reserved for individuals who attended non-accredited schools. So that is something for the advisory committee potentially to weigh in on. There is also the definition of in residence that was discussed by the advisory committee previously and by the individual who provided public comment. Recently, 4 of the professions have changed that definition in regulation. The previous definition for those professions stated that some of the coursework had to be received while physically at the school in face-to-face contact with core faculty. The new definition for those 4 professions, social work, marriage and family therapy, addiction counseling, and professional counseling, is it could be, it's no longer needed to be in person, and it no longer needs to be at the institution of the school. It needs to be in front of core faculty, face-to-face contact, but that could either be in the physical presence of those individuals, or it could be face-to-face by synchronous video conferencing. So that is another option for the advisory committee. If you wanted to adjust that definition, it would be consistent with the other professions. And then Leslie, and I know kind of in a bigger picture, there was also the discussion about our regulation is based on coursework level requirements, whereas the national accrediting bodies are really moving more to competency-based requirements. In my personal opinion, that's a pretty heavy undertaking. Not that it's necessarily a bad idea, but that's going to take some additional time. So those first 2 items I talked about, those potentially could be recommendations that if you're in favor of, we could write up for you. The other will probably take some additional time, but those are sort of what I recall as being the 3 big points for your committee right now.
And I was gonna, just to further clarify, I guess, I was gonna ask if the first two items, if the committee voted to change anything in those two items, that we could go ahead and put the regulation through with those changes, and then as you go through and do the coursework and make it competencies and, more like APA again, then that could be changed at a later date.
So, so what I would like to do is to open this up for discussion and take these point by point, and maybe we can begin with the first proposed regulation, either augmentation or otherwise change. And then we can take the second, and I would want to open it up for discussion as to what people think regarding making a proposed change.
Just a reminder, the first proposed change would be to say if you received your education from, let's say, an APA accredited program, then we could advance you to the next step in the licensure process versus the status quo, which is you need to, well, there's a couple different paths, but right now it says if you received your education from an APA accredited program, you would still need to meet the specific coursework identified in the regulation. So that's the first item for the advisory committee.
And in the KARs, where might that be?
I will go ahead and share my screen here in your copy of material meeting. This is KAR 102-1-12.
102-2-12. And it's in item little b as in boy.
Yeah, I think it's 102-1-12, I believe, right?
Oh, did I say two? Sorry.
Yeah, but you are correct. It is in item B. A graduate applicant for psychology licensure shall be deemed to have received a doctoral degree based on a program of studies and content primarily psychological as set forth in the relevant statute, or the substantial equivalent of this program in both subject matter and extent of training, if at the time the applicant graduated from the program, this doctoral degree program was accredited by the American Psychological Association. And then if it says that the applicant began the program after March 10th, 2006, the accredited program shall require at least 24 semester credit hours in the substantive areas identified in paragraph B13C, or the equivalent number of quarter or trimester credit hours be completed while the applicant is in residence. If not so accredited, doctoral program for which the applicant was granted the degree shall meet all of the following criteria. So I guess what we're really talking about here in section B is this highlighted text here that starts with if, and then down here to in residence, I believe. That would you agree with that, Leslie?
Yes.
Okay.
Was there a reason why that was added? What's the purpose of after March 2006?
Well, it was initially back when they were I guess online programs were not very common, and they were really concerned about people being on a campus with other students, and that whole experience, that they felt it was important to have specific courses on campus.
Okay.
I guess one alternative way to phrase that would be to essentially make this second part and the third part the requirements for individuals from non-accredited schools, meeting the coursework level requirements and then meeting these program level requirements. And so therefore, if someone attended an APA accredited program, there wouldn't be the additional language requiring that they meet that coursework level requirement. Luckily, did I explain that pretty well to your understanding too?
Mhm.
Seems easier.
Yeah, that makes the most sense to me, what you just said, David.
Yeah, I agree.
So are folks in agreement with the proposal offered by David to bifurcate essentially the um the regulation, so split them in two? For those who are not accredited, it would, for those programs that are not accredited, it essentially, David, you're saying that that it would still apply. And for those programs that are accredited, the change would be made. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct. I mean, from my reading of the regulation, individuals who attend an APA accredited program before March 10th, 2006, they already are able to advance through this. And so for individuals who also receive their education from an APA accredited program after that date, we would be able to advance them through the process as well. But the new reading of this would say if individuals attended a non-accredited program, they would need to meet this coursework level requirements. And then in the section that follows, they would need to meet those program level
The
requirements.
program level requirements. Yes, I would be in favor of doing that.
I
But then-
agree with, I apologize. Go ahead.
That does, though, get to the matter of in residence, right? Because
Yeah, I guess that's the one sticking. Largely, I'm in favor of this, and maybe this is hopping to the in residence issue, and I'm good at hopping issues, so I apologize. But it was a concern brought up last time about testing in person versus online, and so if we allow people just to use the APA accredited, does APA accredited programs allow someone to conduct assessment, get their training assessment, conduct assessments virtually? And maybe I'm hopping or splitting issues.
no, that does get to Jay, you're right. That does get to the second issue of the in residence issue, and that
Okay.
was raised at our last meeting. You are precisely correct.
Yeah.
I guess that would, oh, go ahead.
No, okay, well, thank you. I feel strongly that the in-residence thing, as far as psychological testing, evaluations should be done face-to-face and not virtually. I really feel strongly about that. Part of that's my own bias after doing this now 49 years, but face-to-face interaction, watching behavioral mannerisms and body language, all that can be seen a lot better face-to-face than virtually. I feel strongly about that.
Do we have anyone on the committee right now that's on the university side that would know if APA accredited programs include face-to-face?
So I'm on the university side, but I don't know that I'm not an expert in APA accreditation per se. But one of the things they do look at is how much you offer in person versus online. So they look at a ratio, and some programs that are accredited by APA get around that by having some in-person offerings. They bring them in for a period of time, for example. Again, I can't be an expert in those programs. I don't think there's a ton of them, but there definitely are programs like that are accredited. So they kind of get people in person for some degree of training, I think, to get by that bar, if you will. But again, I'm not an APA accreditation expert. We have to, we just went through accreditation. We have to state how much we do in person if we offer any online, and that is evaluated. So
I always thought.
Go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I was gonna
I'm
ask.
sorry.
I was gonna ask Tiffany if she wanted to say something because she looked like she was wanting to chime in a little bit earlier.
I was on the same lines of Abby. asking if there's anyone on the university side that knows about it. I would also add too, if anyone knows if that changed during COVID, because were students getting those same face-to-face classes during that time?
So
I
there
don't
were
know
some,
how.
yeah, there were
Go
some
ahead.
temporary changes in allowances, but then they drew back on some of those temporary changes and reinstated some of the requirements. You now, if you do, for example, supervision remotely, you have to have significant justification and you have to have policy written to address that to meet those accreditation standards. So it doesn't mean you can't ever do that remotely, but you have to have justification for doing so and that you still meet the bar of those competencies.
Okay.
So it is different, Tiffany, but it is not disallowed, if you will.
Yeah.
And the thing I would say, I mean, personally, and again, being in an APA accredited PhD program, is that I think I really agreed with Tiffany's point. It just seems like 2006 is kind of an arbitrary number. And I think that was when folks were very fearful of online programs just taking over clinical psychology training. And that really hasn't come to pass. And in fact, a lot of those programs have decreased for a number of reasons. So I think that was out of a lot of, probably fears, but they haven't come to fruition at this point in time. To me, if it's APA accredited, I don't even think, again, I know we have an attorney on this board legally, you could say, well, no, we're just not going to let you in because you have this component. I think if we're putting our faith in APA accreditation, we put our faith in APA accreditation and count on them to monitor those competencies. But that's just my opinion.
I can say that I do know the one program that I know is a more online program. They have residencies, but it's not at a campus. So they do meet in person with core faculty, but it's not at a campus, so it doesn't meet our requirements.
And I think that's part of what we were talking about last time as well, that if there's a program like that and it meets APA accreditation and we accept APA accreditation, why would we not accept a program that was APA accredited but did not meet on a campus? They met someplace else, like in a hotel lot, conference room or something.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. What struck me and really caused me to scratch my head was that it seems like my read on APA requirements is that they expect residency, and yet there are programs that are accredited without that. And I understand there's some sort of getting around that involved. But I think you're right. I mean, if a program is accredited by APA, I've thought a good deal about this since the discussion. It's like I don't know what we can say. It's up to APA, I think.
As chair, I try not to weigh in too much on discussions like this. I said to David in a sidebar that I have reservations when it comes to this, but if APA is accrediting, if they are accrediting programs in such a way where where people can come and be in person for a discrete period of time, and that counts as a residency or being in residence, as Ned just said, I think that it would be all right to leave it up to APA. If we are going to go ahead with the first point, then, or with the first change, I think that going forward with the second change would be consistent with the way in which we would want to think about things. Because if we're going with how APA wants to do things or how APA does things, we might want to be consistent with our thinking. That's just my 2 cents about it. And not just Ned's thinking, but those who preceded him and how they talked about it. Anyone else want to express thoughts one way or another? I don't want to stifle or shut down debate because this is, I think, a pretty important and substantial change in our educational requirements. Well, seeing none, should we take a formal vote, Dave, one by one on proposed changes, or should we wait for language that you might put together with Leslie?
I'd be happy to bring something back to you, if that would be helpful.
How about we do that for both points, and then we could review it at our October meeting. Go from there.
Okay.
I thank y'all for really thinking about this matter because this will have an effect on the training of future psychologists here in the state of Kansas. And that obviously has a significant impact on the protection of the public, which is what we are here to do. I'll move on to, it is 7:35.
Richard, if you don't mind, if you're open to suggestions.
Yes.
Just given the length of time of the committee, it might be helpful to move to new business just to.
Yes, I was thinking, that's why I said it's 7:35 out loud. I was thinking that we might move to new business point A, and bump old business down if we might get to it. Let's move on to new business with respect to point A, and that is the revision, that is the selection of a new person to serve on the advisory committee. So Dave, I'll have you give an overview and then we can open it up to discussion.
Okay, thank you, Richard. As you recall, Dr. McNeil stepped off the advisory committee. Individuals can only serve for 4 2-year terms, so 8 years, and they would need to come off the advisory committee. That has changed a little bit recently, so now people can come back, but there does need to be at least a gap in service after 8 years. And so that means there are 9 non-board members on the advisory committee. According to the policy, there can be 10, which means there is 1 open position on the advisory committee. So I previously sent a message to licensed psychologists and licensed in the state of Kansas, asking any individuals interested in being added to the committee to submit a letter of interest and a resume or a CV. And I believe you received materials from 6 individuals who applied for the committee. And so, as I mentioned, there's only 1 open spot, but this is an opportunity for you to review that information and then have a discussion on if you'd like to recommend one of those individuals for advisory committee membership. Just as also a reminder, when discussing or when going through this process, you're welcome to reach consensus if that is helpful in terms of advisory committee recommended new members. You can take a formal vote if you want. You just can't take a private vote. That's not because of the public meeting. Also, the advisory committee policy does include some language that I always find is helpful. It says under the selection in the advisory committee policy, in reviewing nominations, the committee should work to ensure there is diverse representation, including but not limited to geographic setting, gender, culture, and ethnicity. Members should provide representation of the levels of licensing for that discipline, and those members should be selected from among public and private practitioners and educators. And I know your job is challenging because you can only recommend 1 person, but I will turn it over to you. The next step in the process, if you do recommend someone, is that I would provide that name to the chair of the board. That person has the actual authority to appoint people to the advisory committee. But if you can reach a recommendation tonight, I'd be happy to draft that letter and then send it to the chair of the board.
Thank you, David. And as he said, we have 6 excellent candidates that have submitted their names to become a part of our advisory committee. And I'd like to open it up to discussion from you all to discuss if there is anyone that stood out, or if you would particularly recommend a psychologist because you've had interfacings with the psychologist and you know their work to be upstanding. Anyone want to go first to speak on any one of the 6 persons?
I could just say my top 3, and that would be Dr. Pearson, Dr. Noble, as well as Dr. Jordan. And actually, I would recommend them for all very different reasons. Through personal knowledge about their work, contacts in the community, and through the educational systems. But they do represent really different settings. And they're also all from Kansas City area. So I recognize that's definitely a restriction in terms of their representation.
No, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
One of the ones I found interesting was Sarah Getch, because that person is on an accreditation board. They could give us, as we move towards the adoption or not of the EPPP Part 1 and Part 2, how it aligns with APA accredited programs and even the educational considerations that we're currently deliberating on.
I thought she was an outstanding candidate too, and I know her a little bit. My only reservation is that she's actually, her primary location is in Missouri. And I wondered about that. I guess she's accredited or licensed also in Kansas. She's at, what is she at, Kansas City University?
And I know in a technical standpoint, this question does come up sometimes. The advisory committee policy does not state that members of the advisory committee must live in the state, but it is certainly something you can weigh as you take into account different considerations.
In no particular order, I had also liked Dr. Getch and Dr. Jordan. And I don't know either of them.
I don't know any of these people either, even though you'd think I would, being at K Med Center and having a couple of them from the health system here. But just thinking of the breadth of the board as well. And I don't know if this makes a difference. One of them is a PsyD and not a PhD. Does that make a difference?
Well, certainly having breadth and depth of educational experience, I think can be very helpful on this board.
And I wouldn't dispute what you said, Linda, but she's an accreditation specialist for all the programs at that university, which they have a number of programs there. So again, she would definitely probably know the APA accreditation standards, but I think she works to make sure that every program at Kansas City University meets accreditation standards. So it's like a position within a provost office. So I would agree she probably does have expertise, but she might have expertise in multiple areas of accreditation.
And looking over the the candidates, they're all qualified. I really like Dr. Pearson and James Iman. Their resumes stand out in my mind. A lot of experience, especially with Dr. Iman, looking through the years of service that he's had but also, Dr. Pearson as well, and doing work with cognitive behavioral interventions and neuropsychology. I just, those two candidates stand out. I don't know anybody. I'm in Hutchinson, Kansas. I'm a long ways away from the Kansas City area, but that's just my own opinion. Those two people stand out in my mind.
And
I was going to say
then,
Dr. Getch and, oh, sorry, Linda.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say Dr. Getch and Dr. Leonard geographically.
That's what I was thinking.
Down in Wichita as well. So,
Yep. Took the words right out of my mouth. And, like, again, like adult versus in general, or more the administrative side of things. It's like, what are we missing on the board?
And that is in part why I was thinking Dr. Leonard, because he's in Wichita, and he appears to be an early career psychologist, and I think that it can be really helpful to have early career psychologists be present in discussions like these. I know Dr. Pearson personally, and he is an outstanding psychologist. He's a neuropsychologist. And I think that having, in a similar way, having Rodney on the committee, with him having done forensics work, I think that Rodney brought a different perspective on things. And I know that Caleb would bring a different perspective on things. I was similarly impressed with Dr. Noble, not just because we share 5 letters of the same last name, but because of the experience that that she has with KU Med. Those were the folks that kind of stood out for me. And I actually know Dr. Jordan. She's really good too. Does anyone seem to sound like they rise to the top? There have been multiple people who spoke on Dr. Getch. There have been multiple speakings on Dr. Jordan. There have been a couple of speakings on Dr. Leonard, multiple on Dr. Noble, a couple on Dr. Pearson. I'm kind of doing a exploratory factor analysis in my head. Let's see if there's an eigenvalue that comes up.
I'm gonna argue with myself about Dr. Getch. Given what I said earlier, in some ways it could contribute to the range of the, settings and involvements, and even state in a way. She's just such an outstanding person in terms of her background experiences, what she's doing now, particularly around regulations, being able to prepare programs in those areas, and given what we've been dealing with, that I'd hate to let that application go.
Yeah. I agree with you. Just in terms of what I think, some of the questions that have come up, I think she would add a qualitative essence, for lack of a better word, to what we're doing here, especially as we look to revise some of our statutes and our regulations. So here's my question though, not to also second guess myself, but in order to apply for this position, doesn't she have to be licensed in Kansas? I didn't go out and check that.
I did. All 6 of the individuals are licensed in Kansas.
Okay.
Okay. And
I just want to give another opinion about Dr. Leonard. I thought he was very strong as well, and that's someone I don't know, but representing the Wichita area, also being the director of a counseling center, I mean, they would have a lot of familiarity with training, and again, just representing that part of the state, I think would be really helpful and beneficial. So, and I agree. I think it's really nice to have early career folks involved in boards like this. So I'm going to throw that in.
I think those are the 2 that stand out to me, and we only have space for 1 though, right, David?
that's correct. You have 9 non-board members in the advisory committee. So at this point, you can only add 1, but there will be opportunities in future years for people to reapply.
So oh, David, were you about to say something?
No, that was me. I'm sorry, but you
Oh,
can
Abby,
go ahead. No, you're good. You can go.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in terms of what we don't have, what we're missing, doesn't Dr. Leonard hit the most categories of what we're missing currently?
I would say that if we are looking for someone who is more early in their career, and if we would want someone in terms of geographic diversity, Mark is from out west. Do we have anyone else west of Topeka?
I don't see any.
Is it Doug? Oh, yeah, Doug, right? Is he still with us?
Yes, he's not
He
here
isn't-
tonight.
Isn't he west? Like
Yes,
far
he is.
west? Way out there.
He is? Oh,
No, he's
He's listed
he's
as
on the southeast.
Oh, made that up. Sorry.
so Doug is southeast. I
Mark.
thought that we didn't have anybody from Wichita, and that was something that
Well, I'm originally from Wichita, which doesn't really count, but I would say if Mark is from Hutchinson, that's pretty close to Wichita. I think of that as close versus I don't think of that as Western Kansas. I don't know.
South Central Kansas, you're right, an hour from Wichita, northwestern Wichita.
So I think that
I feel like these people are also qualified. I'm ready to give my seat up so you can take 2. and you would be adding by subtracting.
Doug is from Chanute.
Oh, deep southeast.
Yeah.
So I think that there seems to be some consensus forming around either Dr. Leonard or Dr. Getch. And to the question around the sorts of things that we would like to see on the board, Dr. Leonard does seem to get at geographic diversity and diversity in experience, being an early career psychologist. And I think that can be a real asset. I would agree when it comes to Dr. Getch that she's currently working in areas that would be beneficial to what it is that we're doing. And I am an advocate for having early career psychologists do work on committees like these so that they can get an understanding as to how the profession works. Anyone feel strongly about anybody else? And do we want to take a vote on anyone, or do we feel like we want to throw our support behind one or the other?
You know, I don't think I spoke up yet, and I think those are both solid candidates. I do think that the expertise argument for Dr. Getch is compelling to me, and that it seems like we get into some of these pretty technical questions when we're looking at regs, and having that background does seem helpful, but I think they're both strong candidates.
All right. Well, maybe we might take a vote. For those who might be, let's go in alphabetical order of last name. For those who might be more in favor of Dr. Getch, might I see a show of hands? I see 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor of Dr. Getch. And may I see a show of hands in favor of Dr. Leonard? 1, 2, 3, I can't count. 1, 2,
5, 6.
6. So on a vote of 6-3, we have voted in favor of selecting Dr. Christopher Leonard to the advisory committee, to the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee of the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board.
Right. Well, I will draft a letter to the chair of the board with the recommendation for Dr. Leonard. And so appreciate all your discussion on candidates. And the next step, if the chair of the board appoints the new member in September, then I will notify that individual about the next meeting in October, and I'll also notify the other candidates at that time.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I hope that these folks apply again, because they were excellent, and we would hope to not lose excellent people to serve on the advisory committee. We are at 7:56, and I don't think that we have time to delve into any of the remaining items, but maybe we could foreshadow to the next meeting, Dave. Do you want to maybe speak to item B under new business briefly, and we could adjourn thereafter, or we can talk a little bit about what the old business was too.
Sure. And, there is one item that if you wanted to forward a recommendation to the board and have the board give specific direction for the ASTPB meeting, that would probably need to take place at this meeting just to make sure there's enough time for that. That has to do with the EPPP discussion. So we could go ahead and postpone that, but I think for the board to be able to take a recommendation from the advisory committee and then meet at the September meeting to give direction, it probably needs to take place tonight. So
do folks have 10 minutes over that they can? I'm seeing a couple of people shaking their heads no. I thought I saw Sarah say no, that she does not. 7 is quorum.
Sorry, my kid started freshman year. I gotta deal with some stuff and help out a little bit. So
No, you go ahead. We lose quorum at what, Dave?
You just need 7 members.
7. Okay. Are others strapped for time? Ned is, David is. We may lose quorum with that if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I count myself? We may have 7 on the nose, because we would need to take a vote on it, right, Dave? That's an action item.
Right. If you wanted to forward an official recommendation to the board, you would need a majority. So you would need 7 people here for that. So right now you have it's like 9 members. So
and if we lose Sarah and Ned, that's
If
Oh, we
you,
won't have quorum because David also has to go to.
I can stay on.
Okay.
I'll let my freshman dangle.
No, no, no. Okay, well, let's see if we can wrap this up in 5 minutes. I will let the two members that need to go depart. Thank you all. Thank you both for your time this evening. We will see you the 8th of October, 2024 at 6 p.m. that Tuesday night. I appreciate y'all's time. I'll see y'all soon.
so just to kind of frame this for the advisory committee members that can hang on a little bit longer. This is something that we discussed a little bit before, starting January 1st of 2026. ASPPB, which is the creator of the test, has put out an announcement by the board of ASPPB that if you want to continue to use the EPPP after that date, you would have to require passage of both parts, part 1 and part 2. They're going to be reframing the conversation on the test. And so instead of it being the EPPP and the EPPP2, they are now 2 parts of the same test. And so in your packet of material, you have that original announcement from October 28th, 2022, stating the implementation date as of January 1st of 2026. There were concerns from some states, including Texas and others, that they did not believe they would be able to require both parts to get that through their legislative process. And they were concerned that their legislature would say no. So they wouldn't be able to use the EPPP, which means they wouldn't have a licensing test for psychology. So they have pursued other measures, maybe even creating their own test. But essentially, they have proposed, that they said also that perhaps the argument that it would be one test with 2 parts would not work, which is why you have the second letter from ASPPB on June 17th, which basically says there's an alternative solution that you could have the test administered over 2 days for one fee. So if that as a technical aspect would help it be considered one test, the board of ASPPB would be in favor of doing something like that. But I think the proposed amendment by Texas representatives basically says we would like to make this optional for states, that any states that choose to adopt the EPPP2 as a requirement are still free to do that, but not all states are required to adopt the EPPP2 as of that date. So hopefully that kind of condenses that. And you have an explanation from representatives of Texas, as well as the language of their proposed bylaw amendment. And I guess the question tonight before you is, would you like to make a recommendation to the board? I will be attending the ASPPB annual meeting, and perhaps other members of the board will be attending that meeting. If this is offered by Texas, would you like to make a recommendation to the board that we are supportive of the bylaw amendment, that we are against the bylaw amendment, or that we take no position on the bylaw amendment? So that's kind of what I wanted to bring to you tonight.
I think I agree with Texas that having the requirement that if we want to use the EPPP, I just feel like it's sort of a hostage situation where if you want to use the EPPP, you also have to use and adopt the EPPP2, or they won't let you use the EPPP. And especially because it hasn't really been in use, so that we have some pilot demographics, but when you looked at the pass rates, thank you very much, Mark, because if the pass rate on EPPP1 is around 80%, and you looked at the pass rates on the EPPP2, I'm not sure that it's that requiring that we have to adopt the EPPP2 is a viable option when it hasn't really been
tested yet.
In use.
Yeah.
I would second Linda on that. And my concern too would be cost burden for
Yeah.
students.
Agreed. Because did that read the same way to y'all, that you didn't hit the 80% pass rate until you took it first, second, or third try? So you were hitting the 80% pass rate at third try, right?
That is
Yeah.
correct, Doc.
So, and that,
Yes,
so that's like $5,000 if
Yep.
you were taking. It's completely unreasonable.
What's
That was
wrong?
my thought in the 2 days. Sorry, Richard, like the amount that it's gonna cost. And the fact that it's potentially spread over 2 days is really gonna put up a barrier to advancing our workforce in Kansas.
And anyone who's traveling to test.
Well, and I can speak from experience when I took now it's been probably close to a decade, but I like traveled and had to stay in a hotel room.
Yeah.
And it's not only the cost of like taking the test, but study materials and time. And I'm not sure those resources have been if the test doesn't have a lot of history, and I'm not even suggesting it's a bad or a flawed test or anything like that necessarily, but then the supplemental materials, which I mean, it appeared they got rid of the IO portion of the EPPP, which I was appreciative of for future folks. But what I'm or the IO, yeah, the IO. But I just have a lot of concerns about the cost and burden and how this is going to marginalize students who are already financially struggling and don't have a lot of resources anyway.
Yeah. I agree with that too. I'm with you.
If I could just speak to the concerns raised by all of the esteemed psychologists here, I completely concur. Dave and I have a meeting before we meet to go over the agenda and how we want to do things. And in the meeting previous to this month meeting and in our meeting in the previous to oh goodness, in June, I vocalized similar concerns, especially to Dr. Johnson's point when Tiffany said the issue related to burden of cost, and that opened the floodgates to everybody else talking about the burdens that will be incurred or could be incurred by the test taker. And the test taker is a student. Like, they are entering into the profession, or they are a trainee entering it, technically a trainee entering into the profession. I would be in favor of sending the recommendation on to the board that we would be in alignment with Texas's amendment to what has been proposed by ASPPB. With that being said, it is 8:07. I would like to take a vote on this unless and I don't want to stifle debate. Is there anyone who feels strongly in the other direction? I don't want to stifle dissent. Hearing none, I'll call a vote. For those who are in favor of the advisory committee being, how would we say it, Dave?
I think you could forward a recommendation to the board to be in support of the proposed bylaw amendment from Texas at the ASPPB annual meeting.
What Mr. Fye said. For those who are in favor of that, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, we will forward that on to the BSRB, and that will end our business for tonight. We have a few items of new business that will be brought up in our next meeting, and that will be Tuesday, the 8th of October, 2024 at 6 p.m. Dave, anything else?
Nope. Thank you all for your hard work tonight. Really appreciate the discussions.
And I appreciate you all staying a little bit late. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So
I
moved.
motion to adjourn.
Well, it's the whole community, so there's a second, and I
Yep.
think that we don't need to vote on that. Y'all have a good rest of your evening.
Thank
Too.
you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Dell. Bye-bye.